one job, is to welcome our next speaker. So this next organization are relatively new to CloudStack. I think you would probably be in the camp of some of those people I'm talking about. I think came across CloudStack about a year ago, and in that time have done amazing work in terms of R&Ding, establishing, building a set of products around CloudStack, which are now in the market and now looking very, very successful. So please welcome from US Signal, John.
Thank you. Good morning. How's everybody feeling? Probably better than me, because it's, 4 in the morning my time right this second. So I'm excited to be here in Madrid. First time ever, first time in Spain. First time, obviously, doing one of these conferences. But I also, have some experiences keynoting these style conferences. It was only, a short 15 years ago that I was doing these types of conferences for another company that we shall not name. But it's very, very similar. So excited to be here. I've been riding this wave of innovation pretty much all my life. Started very young, early in web hosting in my bedroom. Got a DSL line, started hosting web servers there. It was perfect. Got into the real world, started doing this whole virtualization thing because we needed to get more efficient with our money. Rode the wave into cloud and all that other fun stuff. So it's been a good ride for me. But about that, I've learned a few things along the way. I've had some pretty good life lessons. So I put together a deck today full of information that probably each of these slides could be a talk in itself. But it's to kind of give an overview of how I go about navigating the waves. So we're going to talk about what waves are big, and I think we have some pretty good ideas. Two-letter acronym that everybody's talking about is a pretty big wave going on right now. I'll talk about how I think infrastructure is going to look in the future, what I think some of the headwinds that we're going to face, and then what are the absolute gotchas that could take out the business that I've seen happen over the years. So first, let me get into this. I'm John White. I am the COO at US Signal. If you scan that QR code there, it'll take me by my LinkedIn. Hopefully, everybody will connect with me there, or we can connect in person. Like I said, I've been in infrastructure 20-plus years. I have the gray hair to kind of prove it, and I have the gray in my beard I see every morning to prove it as well. I've been really focused on innovation, so either chief innovation officer somewhere or an individual contributor focused on innovation. I did get to spend a year in AWS, in the belly of the beast, so the largest public cloud. I got to get a pretty good education where I learned a few things that I'll talk about in this. I've built a few products that hit Gartner Magic Quadrant, which is pretty cool. And today, I'm responsible for a whole bunch of stuff: engineering, solution architecture, cloud engineering on the network side of it as well as innovation. And I brought David and Davin with me from US Signal, who is a big part of focus and why we're here building our product, Open Cloud. The business, US Signal, we've been around for a while. 2001, we were established. 2 core competencies of fiber and data centers. So we run about 9,500 miles of fiber, run 16 data centers today and continuing to grow that. We service about 2,500 customers across the United States. So it's a really interesting business, probably like a few others that I've seen here today, focused on the hosting provider, continuing to grow and evolve that. So let's talk about the why, some of the trends that matter. This is the ones that I think are going to create a new marketplace for everybody here. Our customers are going to evolve and change, and then we're going to evolve and change our business. So Giles mentioned it, the Gartner hype cycle. I love it. If you go through a majority of these things, you have no idea what the heck they're even talking about, but there's always gold inside of them. The 2 big trends that I'm focused on right now, obviously AI, but also cloud native and what that could possibly mean for the future. Now, when everybody talks about AI, they always think, the bigger stuff. As you can see, the AI supercomputing, that's there. I want to focus more on how the AI is really going to touch the enterprise and our user. And I think we have some accelerants to kind of go along with that. Repatriation, that was also mentioned, and edge. And I'll talk through each of those in detail. So let's talk about artificial intelligence. Everybody obviously knows about artificial intelligence from the infrastructure space. Billions of dollars are being spent on building data centers. Billions of dollars are being spent on buying NVIDIA cards that aren't even out yet. But what people are not talking about is the phases of AI that's going to go on from the infrastructure space. Today, we're living in this world. We're building these big training data centers, training these models. Everybody has some sort of LLM that's out there. The big thing that I think is available for us as infrastructure hosters is this next phase, the inference phase. And why? Well, we're going to have to take all that data that we're learning and training inside of these models and actually start to make sense for it at the edge. And I'll talk a little bit about on the edge side of things. But this inference is also going to create an influx of infrastructure that we haven't seen. If you look at it today, inside of everything we know about AI, if it's 100 gigawatts plus, and we're saying in the next 7, 8, 9, 10 years, it's going to get to 300 gigawatts, that's a tripling of a market, which is insane to think about when something's already pretty big. And if you think about the money that's involved in there, that's taking something that's a $1 trillion TAM today and making it a $3 trillion TAM in the next 10 years. The amount of opportunity created in this shift of centralization to AI into inference, I think is going to be something that we've never seen before. And so I'll continue to deep dive on that wave. And I think I'd be remiss if I didn't talk about generative AI, and two reasons why. One, it's the fastest growing technology that I've ever seen. I think OpenAI had 1 million users inside of 24 hours, and that's insane. But the other side of it that I think is insane, which is going to be the bigger part that we're going to ride in this wave, is the democratization of AI, and that's happening in a form of falling cost. I've never seen a technology drop in cost as much as you've seen a generative AI token occurring. And if you look at it, 240x cheaper in about 14 months. I've never seen that happen inside of my 20-plus years. And I think this is going to create a huge opportunity for everyone to ask this almighty powerful machine to help them. Right now, a lot of Gen AI is focused on what? Text, media. But if you start focusing on that on business problems, and you allow a dummy business user like me to participate in a hackathon via generative AI, think about the power that's going to provide. That's going to allow a lot more people to go and actually interact with different code base, different business infrastructure, to then go and solve real-world problems. So one of the accelerants and the other wave that I see out there is cloud native, and I think that accelerant is actually going to be used, the edge, to actually push that. So if you have this all-powerful, central AI LLM that's out there, you're going to have to be able to push it to the edge to provide those insights. When we were building the internet originally, 100 to 200 milliseconds of latency was fine for a human. But when you start to think about machine-to-machine applications, it's going to start to look completely different. And for years, we've been talking about how microservices are the way, and the microservices are going to drive cloud native, and it's going to drive edge. I think we're going to change and shift that. I think where it was always taking the monolith and replacing it with cloud native, it's going to be the monolith plus cloud native to kind of put it all together. So the way I'm envisioning the world, and this is a JW original diagram, I didn't find this somewhere, but the way I see the world happening is that we're going to have edge infrastructure at customer prem, we're going to have it in multiple data centers, and we're always going to have a tie into the hyperscalers. You're going to have low latency links that connect it together, high speed bandwidth, but you're also going to have a shift in application set. Where it was, again, we're replacing the monolith, moving into microservices. I think it's going to go from a monolith plus microservices. If you think about the human body, we only have one brain, right? But we have fingertips and we have nerves in those fingertips that we know if we touch a hot stove to pull your hand away. And I think that's the application form that we're going to see in the future. We're going to have one big monolith living in one of these places, and then we're going to have the edge customers touch along the way. I mean, think about the future where if you're buying clothes and you put your augmented reality glasses on, the last thing you're going to want to have is latency when you're flipping through. You don't want to see the buffering that we saw in the 90s and the 2000s. You want that instant access. This is the platform that we're going to need to develop from an infrastructure space. Our application folks are going to have to figure out how to work and evolve inside of this, but I believe this is the infrastructure of our future. Now, I think another big accelerant to this whole thing is cloud repatriation. I've been talking about it really since 2017, as I saw it was a really big thing. And when I was at AWS, I even saw it inside of my workings there. Some customers went all in on cloud, jumped in 2 feet first, and they said, this is our path. They weren't paying attention to what was going on inside of their data center. They weren't paying attention to what was going on inside of their bills. And this is going to create a big problem for them. But I think cloud repatriation is going to be the accelerant to AI because it's the ultimate budget creator. Think about it. You have all this IT spend out in a public cloud today. If you could reduce that by 20, 30% of what you're seeing, a lot of these cases that are coming out, that can create your budget to actually build your AI models. About a month and a half ago, I was at a conference in Las Vegas, and a representative from Geico actually talked about their repatriation model. If you're not familiar with Geico, it's an insurance company in the United States, about $35 billion insurance company, so it's pretty sizable. They talked about their cloud journey and their repatriation out. So they actually were going towards Azure for the last 10 years. During that last 10 years, they saw a 2.5x increase in spend with a minimal new load actually on the system. So they weren't adding a lot. But during that time, they saw a 97.3% SLA. So that's about 20 hours every month that they were down or experiencing some sort of downtime or degradation. That doesn't work for a business that's $35 billion in the insurance game, and when something bad goes wrong, they need to be up and running. They're focusing on moving it over back into OpenStack, actually, and they're actually moving everything, or they're planning to try to move everything out of Azure to create a lot of budget, create a better SLA for their business in the future. They were early adopters in the cloud, if you think about 10 years ago. I think they're early adopters on the repatriation, but I think we're going to see a lot more of this moving forward. Again, to create that AI budget, this is the simplest, easiest lever that they can pull. All right, so let's talk about future state. What will this look like, and how will customers operate in the future? I think it is fair to say that multi-cloud will be the way. Even Geico pulling out of Azure, I think it's a strong goal to think that everything will come out of Azure, because they probably created some sort of API or some sort of microservice that can live there, like I talked about earlier. And I think multi-cloud will be the way. Pulling some data on this, according to a Forbes article, it's cheaper to go multi-cloud, about 33.6% less expensive than running inside of one single public cloud. And on the other side of it, it's cheaper to run in multi-cloud than doing it all inside of their own data center. And that's the Goldilocks, I think, that all businesses are going to have to run through to figure out where the right fit is. And I don't think it's going to be one cloud either way, whether it's private or public. If you look at the Flexera State of Cloud, which is a great report that I've been following for a lot of years, 89% of the people say that they're going to be multi-cloud. It's a pretty good opportunity for us building on Apache Cloud Stack, right? That's where our view of the world comes into play from US Signal, is we think that it's going to be a mix. You're going to have your hyperscalers, you're going to have your private cloud, you're going to have your stuff that we don't even touch, you're going to have your multiple hypervisors, your multiple platforms. That is the world we're living in. That's the world I think if we embrace, we'll be able to go and get more of that TAM as it evolves. I don't think I would be here if I didn't believe this statement. I think open source is going to be the way of the future. The open source infrastructure is going to be the way that we're going to have the most success moving forward. I think when IBM purchased Red Hat, it put a lot of validity into open source, that this is actually a real business model. This is something people want to use. When you look at then the open hardware that's out there that Meta is putting out there, I think that again says, okay, there's a little bit of a different way we can think about it on how we build and design these systems. But if you look on the services side, and this is a piece of data that I was able to find inside of the United States, and I forgot to apologize. There is a United States slant on this. I'm sorry. I'm from the United States. That's where I live. So hopefully you can give me some data points from where you're from in the world, but there is a little bit of a U.S. slant here. But if you look at this, it's growing at a 17% CAGR. Pretty good. Cloud's growing at like a 10% CAGR inside the United States. If you look at this scale, though, and this is, I think, what's really interesting is when you're forecasting, I can't remember, this data I think was from pre-Broadcom announce, which I think we'd see more accelerant here now. That's an $89 billion TAM over in 2030 is what they were predicting. And I think we're going to see continued growth of this. Again, we're here because we believe open source is the way. We're going about this mindset pre-Broadcom messing up our lives a little bit. But I think this is something where we can all agree that open source, and if you can, again, point Gen AI to it to help drive open source in the future, this is going to be a big path. This is where I think infrastructure is going to go in the future. I've talked about it a few times. I think latency is going to become the new currency of our future. Already right now, if you think about the amount of data that we're going and farming inside of these AI tools, and you think about what generative AI is producing from new data, we're already planning to be in the yottabyte era in the future. We're planning to be at a high scale that we've never even seen before. And if you look at the traditional infrastructure, hardware vendors, even the cellular vendors of what we have today, it can't compete and it can't handle what we're going to see from this scale in the future. So right now, I know inside of our business, we're focusing heavy on building fiber and dense count for the hyperscalers and high speed like we've never seen before. But I think as we go and evolve and as we get those insights to the edge and as we want to get that data out there, you can't have a self-driving car sit in that buffering mode that I talked about earlier. It just won't work. The machines want to have access to the data. The people want to have access to the data. Every use case you think about, from retail to gaming to education, it's going to need to be high speed. It's going to need to look different. So I think one of the things that we're focused on right now is investing inside of all of these. Building fiber, figuring out what we're going to do from a hardware standpoint, and then watching and figuring out the trends for cellular, as that's going to drive a lot of IoT use cases that we haven't seen before, which is going to then put more data in the system. It's kind of crazy to think about some of the numbers on this middle side of it. We're designing a network right now that is throughput of 800 gig per link. And like when you think about that in your head, like it boggles my mind, but it's like, that's 800 gig today. They already have 1.6 terabit coming very short after and continuing to scale from there. So the amount of bandwidth that we're going to need to kind of go through that tripling of the TAM as we go to inference is going to be there, but it's all about the investments and where you put your money. And obviously HPE, I mean, I think they're buying Juniper for $18 billion or something like that. So they obviously see that investment coming through as well. So big factors going into the infrastructure there. So what's going to cause us some issues? What are going to be these headwinds that are going to cause us problems to seeing this successful future where this big TAM just comes into our lap and we all are living happy with all this money, as well as when we have this huge education because we're learning a ton of stuff along the way. One of the biggest things that I think is going to create issues for us is the internet adoption. We're still only halfway, we're still only about halfway on the amount of people that are connected to the internet. So 3.7 billion people still do not have access to the internet. So when you think about contributing to open source, or you think about this AI-rich community that we're going to have out there one day, and we want to have this, this autonomous, this democratized AI, we're going to need more people on the internet to then figure out how to solve that problem. And I think this is going to be one that's going to create challenges for businesses as well as create challenges for us to scale. We have to figure out how to get more people on the internet. The biggest limiting factor that I see from infrastructure side of it is power. We've spent years and billions of dollars creating renewable power. What's the problem with renewable power? It actually generates very, very little power. And so if you think about that, the tripling from 100 gigawatts today to 300 gigawatts, that's a monstrosity that we can't even have. And if we do not have the power to get to the 300, we won't get to inference. We won't get to cloud native. We won't get to this AI-rich world. We'll have this big stumbling block. So I think now what I think the call to action is for a lot of folks is actually figuring out this nuclear side of it. I know in the United States, we are very, very behind here. I know in different areas of the world, you're a little bit further ahead. We are very behind. We've had one new nuclear reactor come on for all the United States in the last 25 years. This is going to become a challenge for us as we scale. But thinking about this forward even more, I don't know if you know this, but in the Industrial Revolution, it was actually seen as strategic to own your own power plant, because you could guarantee the manufacturing of whatever widget you were making. And I think we're going to see that big trend start to occur inside of the data center space as well. I know from our world, we have data centers all over the United States. I'm constantly looking at new ways to come up with power. Natural gas generation is one that we're looking at pretty heavily. So we would actually generate our own power inside the data centers. Regardless of how it all comes together, this is going to be an inhibitor for us to grow and for us to succeed into that TAM. And it's something we should all be aware of and be thinking about. The cheaper we can get power, the better, obviously. But if the supply and demand curve continues as it stays right now, we're going to have a challenge. In the United States, we're seeing a 23% CAGR on power sale price since 2020. So it's weird. And we've seen power is obviously a long-running commodity. Commodities usually go down. We're finally seeing an uptick. That's going to create a lot of challenges for people. In United States, in Pennsylvania, AWS and Microsoft are going and turning on old nuclear plants. And so they're doing one actually in Wayne, Pennsylvania. AWS is doing it. It's about a 0.5 gigawatt site. It actually just got denied because of the cost it's going to create for all the other people and users on the system. So this is going to be a big challenge for us in the future. Our biggest headwind that we face, though, is something we've been talking about for years. It's this technical debt. And the technical debt is skeletons living in everybody's closets. We all know it. We still have companies still out there running mainframes. You can still go, if you go to a Marriott property, you can still see their green screen. These are all challenges that they have to kind of figure out what this AI world's going to look like in the future. But technical debt's gotten worse, right? We have all these people that went all in on cloud and have failed cloud projects, that are overspending, that are out of budget, and they don't know what to do for the future. And so I think we're going to go into this cyclical cycle of people having businesses fail because they can't figure it out. I saw a meme on the internet the other day that was priceless. I should have put it in here. But it was talking about a legacy company going and adding AI. And it was a bar of soap with a soap pump right on top of it and said, there you go. That's us in AI. And that's what's going to happen with all these companies that can't get out of their own way. But technical debt's even more scarier than it ever has been. Why? Because a lot of this is human-based. People don't want to change, and that's going to be the biggest issue. I used to talk about this on a regular basis. I used to call people with a lot of technical debt cavemen. Cavemen was citizens against virtually everything. They didn't want to try something new. They didn't want to do something that was different than the norm. This is going to become a big challenge and a big headwind for where we want to go as an infrastructure society. So on that note, some headwinds. Let's talk about the gotchas. The headwinds are going to just slow you down. The gotchas are going to potentially wreck you completely. I think the biggest issue that we're all facing right now is continued large-scale disasters. And I would say that CrowdStrike is probably the biggest one I've ever seen. I was actually supposed to fly that week, and I just saw all the airports close down because of that CrowdStrike outage. And we've seen it multiple times. We've had Azure outages. We've had collaboration outage. These are the big things that are going to continue to create these pitfalls that are going to put us back or even take out some businesses along the way. And if you think about this wave of AI, we've already seen some challenges here. I think it was somewhere, I can't remember where, somewhere in Europe, though, where a Samsung employee put documents into ChatGPT to actually learn something. But once the data goes into ChatGPT, does it ever come out? No, it's all part of the world. So I think we're going to have some issues and challenges as people start to use AI for malicious things. As we have more centralization of systems, that's going to create some challenges. And then as you start to think about the political and government unrest in certain countries, that's going to create us more challenges for the future. I think this is going to lead to a lot of failed businesses and obviously challenges for our companies. There was a ton of failures during the dot-com boom. Everybody loves to talk about them. Pets.com is probably one of my favorites. You had all this funny money going around. The same thing is going to happen in this wave of AI. I don't know where it's going to be. You don't know where it's going to be. You don't know when it's going to happen, but I promise you it will happen. And I talk to my team about this all the time. Like, we want to be involved in AI, but we want to be selling picks and shovels. And we could probably sell some tents and some blue jeans as well. I'm sure somebody is wearing Levi Strauss jeans today. And that was coming from the gold rush. And the gold rush, yes, there was a lot of people that made a lot of money. But at the end of the day, the people that walked through that TAM, when Giles pointed to that far right, that plateau where everybody wants to live, because that's really nirvana, you have to be focused on these things. The people that went out and bought this land and said, all right, I'm going to prospect it for gold, those are the ones that are going to have the failure. That same thing is going to happen. And it's going to impact our business two different ways. We're going to have our customers failing, and they're going to go out of business. We're going to go and put some bets down on behalf of our customers and where we think the puck is going, and that's going to create some challenges for us as well. So this is something that we need to watch out for as we go and we figure out this whole new wave of AI in the future. Last but not least, I think the biggest thing that will throw you off is the lack of patience. You know, I think the days feel long right now, but the years go by quick. That happens with kids. That happens with everything. And I think if I could tell myself, if I could go back in the past and say, what could I do better, is to have more patience. And I think the businesses that have patience, that see this journey and understand how big this journey really is, are going to be the ones that have the most success. Up here, I have the Time Machine of the Year. So this is usually a Man of the Year, something like that. 1982. I was 1 year old. So I was born into this industry, right? But if you look at it, that's the personal computer in 1982 was the Time Machine of the Year. I would argue that we didn't have personal computing until this, 2007. It's a 25-year journey we went on to get this, true personal computing. If you think about cloud, think about virtualization. Cloud, 2010, 2012, we could argue. So if you think about that, we're at the midpoint. Think about AI, I would say, okay, not until we had OpenAI that we really truly get that wave started. So if we have 25 years of this AI wave, and if we're not patient inside of this thing to get to that end of the 25 years, to be Levi Strauss and be 75 years into the cycle, we're going to have big challenges. And we're probably not going to have successful businesses. So that's one of the biggest gotchas that I think that I'm telling my team is, yes, we're moving fast, we're evolving fast, but patience is going to be the key for longevity in our success in the future. To summarize all of this, I create you the JW wave, patent pending. So in the middle, this is my wave, and this is my hype cycle. This is not the Gartner hype cycle, this is the JW hype cycle. So we have AI and cloud native living in the middle. This is the big wave that I think we should all be focused on. And if you look at this side of it, we have the things that are pushing it. Repatriation is going to be the best AI budget creator that we've ever seen, and it's going to drive innovation like we've never seen before. The infrastructure investments, trillions of dollars are going into investments into data centers, into GPUs, into networks, into everything. That's a huge push and tailwind on these waves. I think open source is another huge push towards us. We're seeing it in hardware, we're seeing it in software, we're seeing it obviously in virtualization infrastructure. And you're right, virtual infrastructure should be boring. It should just run, it should just operate. But I think what's happening is now we have a diversity of infrastructure, and that's the true opportunity that we have available for us. We have a ton of innovation going on in connectivity, and I think multi-cloud is finally here, and we're going to drive this wave. But on this side, if we don't figure these things out, how do we get through technical debt? How do we figure out the power side of that? How do we get more people on the internet? It's going to slow us down. And then obviously down at the bottom here, we have our pitfalls. Global failures are going to set us back. What happened when CrowdStrike happened? Who was affected by CrowdStrike? Nobody. Oh, a few people. Okay. What happened? What happened after CrowdStrike then, or any big global failure? You had to sit there through meetings. How could this happen? How could we never make sure this never happens again? And now we're investing all over the place to try to figure this out. This is going to slow us down. This is going to create pitfalls. All these failed business models, all these AI startups and failures. We're working with some companies right now for co-location, and they want all this custom liquid cooling. Millions and millions of dollars. It's fine. I'll build whatever you want. Guess what? You're paying for it up front because I don't know if you're going to be here a year or two from now. We saw this with the Bitcoin miners. We don't want this to happen again. And then the lack of patience is going to be the next big pitfall that we're going to have. So with that, hopefully I provided some new perspective for you. I want to definitely keep the conversation going over the days, weeks, months. As everything open source goes, these slides, my notes, are all here. So if you scan this QR code, take it, make it better. I want to hear where people go with it. I wanted to give you, again, a highlight reel, some talking points. I want to be challenged on some of these things too. So if you have ideas on anything I talked about, love to hear it. I thank you again for your time. I thank you for the invite to come to Madrid, and I thank you for now. I can put on my LinkedIn profile, international speaker. Thank you.